Personally, so I don't need to, I'm not that good of a human being, so I appreciate everything that was said by Brother Zachariah. And inshallah, God willing, I'm not the traditional Muslim Imam that most people assume they're going to meet. First of all, I'm not Middle Eastern. I'm not from Africa. I'm not a minority. I'm a white Irish guy from Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan. So I'm way different than what anyone thinks that they're going to get. My grandparents moved here in 1952 from Belfast, Ireland, where they were escaping English occupation if you're Catholic. If you're Protestant, they were escaping their own lunacy, whatever it comes down to. But what I learned as a child growing up from this heavily Irish family that was very politically involved is that my grandparents were trying to teach me hate. When I was 5 years old, my grandmother gave me a British flag. And I said, why are you giving me this flag? You know, I'm American, I have nothing to do with that. And she said, this is to remind you how much they hate you. This is to remind you how much they hate you. And I said, no one in England hates me. There's no one in England right now saying, that kid in Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan, if I ever get my hands on him, he's gonna rue the day his family ever stood up to England, right? No one ever did that. They were teaching me like old world hate. And they were masking their political agenda in the form of religiosity. So they were taking their thirst for an independent Ireland and they were saying it's a Catholic cause. But they were teaching me also that everyone was the other. That this person over there was the other. For some reason, their life, their respect, everything about them was less than mine because they were the other. When I became a Muslim, I realized quickly that I was the other. So we have these discussions nowadays about white privilege. And for a lot of Caucasian Americans, it's a very uncomfortable subject because it doesn't exist. I'm telling you it exists. When I became a Muslim, they took my card away, and I was now, no one sees me as a fat white Irish guy from Hell's Kitchen, Manhattan. Now they see me as a fat Arab. And so everything has changed. I've gone through this thing. I've gone through the airport. I flew to DC, and I had to go through every random check that a person can go through. The demonization of Muslims in Islam, though, began a lot long, way, many hundreds of years before 9/11. So if I was to tell everyone in this room that the pinnacle of transportation was steam engines that would move you across the country at 5 miles an hour, how many of you would believe me? How many of you would say that is the pinnacle of transportation, we can't do any better than that? But unfortunately, we're taking our ideas about Muslims from a pope who started the Crusades. We're taking our ideas about Muslims from a time when the Enlightenment period was coming on to America and into European society, where the two greatest enemies to the world were the papacy and the Khalifa. Right? So we're still taking these ideas about who Muslims are and what they believe from these eras that have long passed us, that we're not taking any other logical ideas from. None of us are sitting here thinking that African Americans are less than white people. Is anybody thinking that? Because if you are, we can talk about that too later. But I hope no one's thinking that. No one's thinking that Jewish people deserve to die because they're somehow less than other people. But when it comes to Muslims, there was a daycare that burnt down in Tampa, Florida last week. It was run by a mosque. I don't know if you guys saw this. But a group of Muslims in Tampa, they went through and they read the mean tweets. They read the comments that people had left after that. And one of them was left by a guy named Bob Shepard, who was a fireman and a Cub Scout leader in Denver, Colorado. I'm from Denver, Colorado. That's where I was before I came here, so I have a lot of good things to say about Denver. I think Denver's a very racially integrated city. I never had any problems myself in Denver with the greater public. I thought it was a great place to live. But he tweeted as an ex-fireman and as a Boy Scout leader, let it burn. That's demonization. That's saying that you don't want children to live because we bought into some scary boogeyman who exists across the seas, who's coming here to take us apart, who's coming to destroy us. We bought into that idea that the other is scary. The other is scary, but you have to realize, and I have to realize to all those people living overseas, we're the other. We're the other. We're the ones that have planes, we're the ones that have bombs, we're the ones that have drones, we're the other. We have to get past that. Once we realize that we're the other, once we realize that I'm the person that someone fears overseas, that I'm the person that someone fears here, that I'm the person that's holding people back from achieving freedom, from achieving life, then we can start living for the other instead of living for self. I was raised Christian. I was taught this very beautiful thing that I think most of you were taught: Jesus first, then others, then yourself, right? That's what I was taught. I'm trying to come up with some Muslim acronym for it, but I can't figure it out. Boy, within my Jewish friends get mad when I say God first, others, and then, but I'm trying to think of that, but we don't have that concept really anymore when it comes to dealing with people. We're not dealing with people one-on-one. We're not dealing with people in the way in which they should be dealt with. We have a beautiful culture of Islam, beautiful heritage of Islam. Abdul Hal's on the top. So Abdullah, you're at the top this whole time. He's the only other Muslim in this room. He can talk because he can do a better job than me. But we need to focus on how we can deal with one another. So there's a great Arab story about a guy who had 3 sons and he died. And he left his 3 sons 17 camels. Anyone ever heard this story? So he said to his oldest son, I'm going to give you half my camels. Then he tells his other son, I'm going to give you 1/5 of my camels. And he tells his third son to give 1/9 of my camels. Can 17 be divided in half? Can 17 be divided into 1/5 and 1? It can't be done. Mathematically impossible, right? So they're standing in the desert and along comes a Bedouin who has a camel. So they say, we have a problem here. We're fighting over this. We're not getting along with one another. We need to divide these camels. So the Bedouin says, well, I have a camel, take mine. So now they're what? 18 camels. Can 18 camels be divided in half? Can you then take 1/5 out of that? You take 1/3 out of that? And at the end of it, you're left with 1 camel. So they gave the Bedouin back his camel. Sometimes we need to learn how to deal with each other in a different way. Sometimes we have to learn how to sit down and have conversations with one another. And that's what these events are about, talk and conversations. So I don't want to stand up here and talk all day. And I know people have questions about Islam, and there's many different answers. The Jewish rabbis always say if you ask a room full of 5 rabbis a question, you're going to get 8 different answers. If you ask a Muslim room, 5 Muslims a question, you're going to get the same amount of answers. There's not going to be one definitive answer for the Muslim faith. But I want to have a dialogue. I don't want to stand up here and talk. I talk all the time, all theologians. That's all we do is talk. We love it. We can't give none of our own voice. So I'd rather have a dialogue to see what are your fears, what are your concerns, what are your thoughts? What do you think is going on in the world? We have what happened in Garland, Texas. We have ISIS. We have bombings of mosques, like the mosque that I'm from was bombed in 2010. Was it 2010 or 2009? 2009? Yeah, somewhat. It was bombed. So we have incidents here in Cincinnati and abroad of things that are going on right now. So what do you guys want to talk about? What can I do to de-demonize or undemonize the Islamic faith besides being a fat white guy? I can show you how to eat a sort of Big Mac in your mouth in one bite. I don't think that's going to really impress anybody. Anyone have anything they want to say? Anything they want to ask? Because I'll sit down and go through that. I don't want to talk today. I want to stand up here and do a long speech. I know you.
Well, you know, I was thinking as you were talking about the differences in Islam, and there's so much diversity within the Christian faith or Judaic tradition, you know, and I'm thinking, I certainly don't want everybody that says that they're acting in the name of Christ or Christianity to speak for me, and so that must get to you many times when you hear people saying that they're speaking for the Islamic faith.
Okay, it bothers me. So we have a problem within Islam, and I'm going to be very honest about that. We have a problem within Islam, and this problem we have is a sense of marginalization. It comes from a colonial mindset where we have to lash out violently on things, right? And it comes from a lot of different, not feeling self-worth, having no economic prosperity, having small chances for life. But we have a group that is very prevalent within Islam, which founds groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, other terrorist organizations. And imagine like the Westboro Baptist Church. You guys are all familiar with the Westboro Baptist Church, right? So imagine they have unlimited resources. They have more money than they know what to do with. Unlimited resources. We're talking billions of dollars a day are being funneled into the Westboro Baptist Church. So with this money, they're able to establish seminaries, universities, to build churches throughout the world, to send their trained clergy throughout the world to disseminate the ideology of the Westboro Baptist Church, or of like the Klux Klan. Would that cause a huge problem within Christianity? that would cause a huge problem within any religion that's allowed to exist. Unfortunately, that's been the case with Islam over the last 85 years. That there's been a group that has unlimited resources, that has built mosques, that has built universities, that has funneled people throughout the world, now speaking in the name of Islam, but from a distorted point of view. One that mainstream Orthodox Muslims don't even understand. We look at it and say, where did you get that from? How did you interpret that? Where did that teaching come from? So imagine if that was to happen to the Episcopalian Church. Imagine if somehow just things went off the rails and all the money in the world just went into funneling somebody who was just full of hate for everybody. I can get into the history of that. So if you guys want to know the history of that, you guys want to know the history of that? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So you guys all know Lawrence of Arabia, right? So T.E. Lawrence was sent by